My child, I know there is something inside you right now that you have not been able to say out loud, not because you have not tried, not because you do not want to, but because whenever you reach for the words, they fall apart before they reach your mouth. Whenever you try to explain it to someone, you watch their face and you can see them trying to understand, trying to follow, and something in you goes quiet because you realize that what you are carrying is not the kind of thing that translates easily into language. It is not a clean wound with a clear cause. It is not something that happened on a single day that you can point to and say, there, that is where it began. It is deeper than that. It is older than that. It is woven into the fabric of how you experience being alive. And the inability to explain it has become its own kind of pain layered on top of everything else. You have sat across from people who love you and tried to give them a map to the interior of what you are feeling, and somewhere in the middle of trying, you gave up. You simplified it. You said something like, I have just been tired lately, or I'm going through something, or I am fine, just a lot on my mind, because the alternative was to try to speak the full truth of it and then watch the confusion in their eyes and feel more alone than if you had said nothing at all. The loneliness of unexplained pain is one of the most particular kinds of loneliness there is. It is not the loneliness of being without people. You may have people all around you. It is the loneliness of feeling that the deepest part of your interior life is inaccessible, not just to others, but sometimes even to yourself. And I want you to hear me say this clearly, directly, with nothing withheld. I already understand it completely, not partially, not approximately, not in the way that a kind person who is trying their best can understand it. I mean that I understand the exact texture of what you are carrying, the precise weight of it, the specific way it presses against the inside of your chest when you are lying in bed at night trying to sleep. The particular note of it that rises when you are in a crowd of people laughing and you are laughing too on the outside, but something underneath is aching in a way you cannot name. I understand the version of this hurt that exists in you right now, in this moment, in the unique history of everything you have lived through and absorbed and survived. I understand the part of it that came from childhood, from the things that were done and the things that were never done, from the silences that shaped you as much as the words did. I understand the part of it that came from relationships that promised safety and then delivered something else. I understand the part of it that has no origin at all, that seems to rise from some place inside you like weather, like something atmospheric and inexplicable, and you do not even know what to do with that, because there is no one to blame and nothing to fix, and it is just there. I understand it, all of it. And here's what I need you to receive, because this matters enormously. The fact that you cannot explain this hurt does not mean it is not real. The fact that you cannot trace it to a source does not mean you are making it up, or being dramatic, or failing to see things clearly. The fact that it does not make complete sense even to you does not mean that it is not worthy of being seen and met and healed. In a world that tends to validate only the pain that comes with a neat explanation, only the grief that has an obvious cause, only the hurt that fits into a recognizable category, you have learned to doubt your own interior experience simply because it resists being easily categorized. And that doubt has been one of the most damaging things of all, because it has kept you from bringing this to me, from asking for help, from believing that what you feel is real enough to deserve attention. I am here to tell you, it is real. I am telling you that I have seen it. I have not needed your explanation to see it, because I do not need language to perceive what is happening inside my children. I see directly. I see past the surface you show to the world, past the explanations you reach for and abandon, past the silence you settle into when the words run out. I see into the place where the hurt actually lives. And I am not confused by it. I am not overwhelmed by it. I am not standing at a distance saying I wish I could help, but I cannot quite grasp what you mean. I am already there, in that place where the hurt lives, and I have been there all along. And I want you to know that my presence there is not accidental and it is not passive. I came there on purpose. I am there because I chose to be there. And I am there with understanding so complete that it would take your breath away if you could feel the full weight of it. This message is for you specifically. If you have found yourself nodding while reading these words, if something in you has gone quiet and still in the way that things go quiet when they are finally being met, this is not coincidence. I am speaking to you. I know your name. I know your history. I know the hurt you cannot explain. And I am not going anywhere. If this message is touching something in you today, I want to ask you to support this ministry through the link given below. Your support helps carry these words to others who are sitting in the same silence you have been sitting in, waiting for someone to speak directly to what they cannot say themselves. There is a reason this particular kind of hurt is so difficult to put into words, and I want to speak to that reason directly because understanding it may be one of the first steps toward releasing the shame you have carried about not being able to explain yourself more clearly. The reason is not a deficiency in you. The reason is not that you are emotionally inarticulate or spiritually underdeveloped or somehow less capable than others who seem to have a cleaner, more accessible relationship with their own pain. The reason is that the deepest wounds are almost always pre-verbal. They are formed in places that exist beneath language, in layers of experience that happened before you had words, or that happened in contexts where words were not safe, or that accumulated so gradually and so quietly that there was never a single moment when language could have attached itself to them. They are not stored in the part of you that thinks and speaks. They are stored in the body, in the nervous system, in the patterns of how you breathe and how you tighten and how you brace yourself in certain rooms or around certain kinds of people. They live in the way your heart speeds up when nothing visible is threatening you. They live in the heaviness that descends without announcement, without cause, without any invitation you consciously extended. And so when someone asks you what is wrong, you reach for words, and you find that the thing you are trying to describe does not live in the word-shaped part of you. It is like trying to describe a color to someone who has never seen it, or trying to explain what music sounds like to someone who has never heard sound. Not because the color is not real, not because the music is not real, but because the instrument of language was not built to carry it. And so you reach and you grasp and you pull up approximations, fragments, shadows of the real thing, and you watch them land wrong in the air between you and the person you are trying to reach, and you feel the gap, and you retreat, and the hurt remains unexplained, and therefore, in some corner of your heart, unvalidated. I want to be the one who validates it without requiring your explanation. I want you to bring me the wordless thing. I can receive it. I am not limited to what can be spoken. When you sit with me in the quiet, when you close your eyes and simply let what is inside you be present without trying to organize it into sentences, I receive it in full. I read what is written in your body. I hear what your silence is saying. I understand the grammar of your tears, even when you yourself do not know why they are falling. You do not need to prepare a presentation for me. You do not need to arrive with your pain neatly organized and logically sequenced. You can come to me in pieces, in fragments, in the middle of a feeling that has no name, and I will meet you exactly there. This matters because one of the ways you have stayed stuck in this unexplained hurt is by requiring yourself to understand it before you bring it to me. There has been a belief operating underneath your conscious awareness that says you need to figure it out first, that you need to get clear on what it is and where it came from and why it is affecting you the way it is, before you are ready to bring it forward. As though I am a specialist who needs a referral and a diagnosis before I will see you. As though my healing is conditional on your comprehension, and I need to dismantle that belief right now because it has been keeping you from the very thing that could help you. My door is not open to the already healed or the fully understood. My door is open to the broken and the confused, and the ones who cannot even fully articulate what they are asking for. Come to me with the confusion itself. Come to me with the not knowing. Come to me with the hurt that has no name and no clear origin and no tidy explanation, and let me be the one who knows what it is even when you do not. There is also something I want to say about the exhaustion that comes from carrying unexplained pain for a long time. When you cannot explain something, you also cannot ask for help with it in a way that lands. You cannot tell people specifically what you need because you do not have a clear enough picture of what is wrong to know what would help. And so you navigate each day carrying this weight that you cannot put down because you cannot name it, cannot hand it to anyone, cannot even fully see it yourself. That is an enormous amount of labor. The labor of carrying what you cannot name, of functioning in the world while something unnamed and unresolved moves through you constantly, of performing normalcy while internally navigating terrain that is genuinely difficult. I see that labor. I honor it. You have been stronger than you know, simply by continuing to show up, continuing to engage with your life, continuing to reach toward connection and meaning, even while carrying something this heavy. And I want to tell you that you do not have to keep laboring to carry it alone. I'm not asking you to put it down by yourself. I'm not asking you to figure out how to lay it aside through willpower or positive thinking or the right combination of habits and disciplines. I am asking you to let me carry it with you. I'm asking you to shift some of that weight onto me, not because I am taking it from you without your participation, but because healing is a shared work. It is something that happens in relationship, in trust, in the gradual willingness to let someone else's strength supplement your own. And I have strength enough for what you are carrying. I have seen the full weight of it, and I am not staggered. I am steady. I am here. And I am more than able. Let me speak now about the specific shapes this unexplained hurt takes in your daily life, because I want you to feel that I am not speaking in generalities. I am not offering you a broad, ambient comfort that could apply to anyone. I am speaking to the particular texture of how this lives inside you and the particular ways it shows up in the hours and days of your actual life. Because the hurt you cannot explain does not stay politely contained in one corner of your experience. It leaks. It spreads. It shows up in places where you do not expect it and in forms that you do not always recognize as the same root thing. It shows up as irritability, as a shortness of temper that surprises even you, a reaction that is too large for what actually happened, a flash of anger or frustration that you feel guilty about afterward, because the trigger was small even though the feeling behind it was enormous. And you apologize, and you feel ashamed, and you think something is wrong with you for not being able to manage your responses more cleanly. But what is actually happening is that the unexplained hurt has been compressed for so long that any small pressure on the outside releases something from the inside that has been building with nowhere to go. The irritability is not the real thing. It is the signal that the real thing is still there, still unaddressed, still looking for a way out. It shows up as numbness, as stretches of time where you feel very little, where the things that used to move you do not seem to reach you, where you go through the motions of your days with a kind of hollow efficiency, accomplishing what needs to be accomplished, but not feeling genuinely present to any of it. And this frightens you sometimes, the numbness, because it feels like something important has gone offline, like you are losing access to yourself. But the numbness is not a malfunction. It is a mercy that your inner life extended to itself when the feeling became too much to hold continuously. It is your heart saying, I need a rest from the intensity of this. I need to go quiet for a little while. The numbness is not the absence of depth. It is the depth resting. It shows up as a particular quality of loneliness, even in rooms full of people. Not the loneliness of being without company, but the loneliness of being present and still unreached, of laughing and talking and engaging and doing all the things that connection is supposed to look like, and yet feeling a glass wall between you and everyone else, a transparency that lets you see them and lets them see a version of you, but that keeps the real interior exchange from happening. And you wonder sometimes if this is simply your nature, if you are constitutionally incapable of the kind of intimacy that others seem to have. And I want to tell you that it is not your nature. it is a protection. It is the response of a heart that has tried to be known and been met with confusion or dismissal or the wrong kind of response, and has learned that keeping the most tender parts behind glass is safer than bringing them fully forward. That glass is not permanent. I can help you take it down, not all at once, but piece by piece, as trust is built and safety is established. It shows up as a hesitation before joy, as a kind of internal flinching when something good happens, a waiting for the other shoe to drop, an inability to settle fully into happiness, without some part of you staying vigilant, scanning the horizon for what is about to go wrong. You step into a beautiful moment, and part of you is already preparing for it to end, already building the internal structure to withstand the loss of it before the loss has even come. This is not pessimism. This is not ingratitude. This is the nervous system of someone who has been hurt in ways they could not predict, who has learned that good things can be taken suddenly and without warning, who has decided at some cellular level that it is safer not to fully arrive in joy than to arrive fully, and then have it ripped away. And I grieve this. I grieve every moment of beauty and goodness that you have not been fully able to inhabit, because the unexplained hurt made full inhabitation feel dangerous. It shows up as a complex relationship with rest, as an inability to simply be still without the unexplained hurt rushing in to fill the silence, which is why you keep yourself busy, keep the noise going, keep the screen lit, or the music playing, or the tasks multiplying, because the moment you go quiet, the thing you cannot name gets louder, and you would rather be exhausted and distracted than still and confronted with what lives in the stillness. I understand the busyness. I understand why you have chosen noise over silence so many times, but I also want you to know that the thing that gets louder when you go still is not a threat. It is not an enemy. It is a part of you that has been waiting for a moment of quiet in which to be finally heard. And I will be with you in that quiet. I will not leave you alone with what rises. If you can learn to let the stillness come, even for a few moments, even imperfectly, I will meet you there, and I will help you hold what surfaces without being overwhelmed by it. It shows up in the body, in the tightness that lives in your shoulders or your chest or your jaw, in the headaches that have no clear physical origin, in the fatigue that sleep does not seem to cure, the kind of tired that is not about rest, but about the ongoing energy expenditure of carrying something heavy inside you for a very long time, in the way your stomach tightens in certain situations, in the way your breath shallows without you noticing. The body has been speaking the unexplained hurt in its own language all along, and the body has been honest even when language was not available. I see what your body is saying, and I am reaching into the physical as well as the emotional and spiritual dimensions of this, because healing in me is not partial. It is not a healing of the soul that leaves the body still carrying the old weight. I came to restore the whole of you. I want to speak now about the ways you have tried to explain this hurt to yourself, because that internal conversation, the one you have been having in the privacy of your own mind, is one that I have been listening to, and I want to respond to some of what you have told yourself about what is wrong with you, because in the absence of an explanation that satisfied you or others, you filled the gap with something. And what most of my children fill that gap with, when their pain resists clear explanation, is some version of a story about their own inadequacy. When the hurt does not make sense, when it does not follow the rules of logical cause and effect, when it persists beyond what seems reasonable or appropriate, the mind reaches for the nearest available explanation, and too often the nearest available explanation is, something is wrong with me. You have told yourself that you are too sensitive, that you feel things more intensely than you should, that a more resilient, more functional, more spiritually mature person would not be affected this deeply by things that others seem to move through without this kind of difficulty. You have used the word sensitive as though it were a flaw, as though the capacity to feel deeply were a design error rather than a gift that has been wounded. And I want to correct that framing directly. Your sensitivity is not the problem. Your sensitivity is one of the most precious things about you. It is part of how I made you. It is part of what makes you capable of compassion, of empathy, of perceiving things that others miss, of being moved by beauty and by suffering in ways that matter. The problem is not that you feel deeply. The problem is that you have been feeling deeply in an environment that was not always equipped to hold what you are carrying, and the wound has come from that mismatch, not from the depth itself. You have told yourself that you are ungrateful, that you have no right to be hurting the way you are hurting, because you are aware of your blessings, because you know that others have it worse, because by the objective measurements of your circumstances, you should be fine, you should be grateful, you should be past this by now. And the awareness of your blessings sits alongside the unexplained hurt and makes you feel guilty for both. Guilty for the blessings you feel you are not appreciating fully enough, and guilty for the hurt that seems disproportionate to your circumstances. But gratitude and grief are not opposites. Blessings and wounds can coexist without canceling each other out. You can be genuinely thankful for what is good in your life and simultaneously be genuinely hurt by what has been hard, and neither cancels the other, and the hurt does not make you ungrateful, and the gratitude does not obligate you to perform a wholeness you do not yet possess. You have told yourself that you should be over it by now. Whatever it is, however long ago it happened, however unclear its origins, there has been a clock running in your head, a deadline for recovery that you keep missing. And each time you find the hurt still present past the deadline you set for yourself, you treat it as evidence of failure. You have told yourself that healing should be linear and time-bound, that a person of sufficient faith or sufficient effort or sufficient self-awareness would have moved past this by a certain point, and the fact that you have not means something is deficient in you, and I want to dismantle this clock completely. Healing does not follow the timelines that human shame assigns to it. The heart does not heal according to the calendar. Wounds that run deep take time that cannot be scheduled or predicted, and the continued presence of pain past an arbitrary deadline does not indicate failure. It indicates that the wound was real, and that it runs deeper than the surface treatment you applied to it, and that it is asking for something more than time and effort. It is asking for me. It is asking for the kind of healing that goes all the way down to the root. You have told yourself that you are broken in some permanent way, that there is something structurally wrong at the center of you, some damage that is not reparable, some part of your inner life that was bent early and has never straightened and never will. This is perhaps the most damaging story of all, because it functions as a ceiling, a place above which you will not allow yourself to hope, because hope from below a permanent ceiling is just a setup for repeated disappointment. And so you have made a kind of peace with the idea of your own brokenness, not the humble peace of someone who knows their need and brings it to me, but the resigned peace of someone who has decided the need is too great to be met and has stopped expecting it to be. You have learned to live with it. You have learned to manage it. And you have stopped asking me to heal it, because somewhere along the way you decided that asking was too costly. I need you to hear this. There is no permanent damage in you that is beyond my reach. There is no bend in your inner life that I cannot straighten. There is no wound so old or so deep or so complicated that my healing cannot find it. I am not a God who heals the easy cases and leaves the complex ones to manage as best they can. I am not limited by the severity or the duration or the obscurity of what you are carrying. I have healed things that had been broken for decades. I have reached into places that had been sealed for so long they had begun to seem like permanent features of a person's interior landscape, and I have brought life back to those places. And I have done it not because the person had everything figured out, but simply because they were willing, in whatever fragmented and imperfect way they could manage, to let me in. The story you have been telling yourself about your own inadequacy is not the truth. The truth is that you are a person who has been carrying something real and heavy without the right kind of help, and the hurt that has resulted is not evidence of your failure. It is evidence of your need. And your need is not a problem to be ashamed of. Your need is the very place where I do my most significant work. I want to talk about the people who tried to help and could not quite reach you, because this is part of the story of your unexplained hurt too. and it has left its own particular residue. There have been people in your life who loved you and who wanted to help. People who sat with you and listened. People who offered advice or prayers or perspectives or presents. People who meant well and tried hard and gave what they had to give. And you received what they offered. And you were grateful for it, and it helped, sometimes, in partial ways, in surface ways, in ways that addressed the edges of what you were carrying, but did not reach the center of it, and they thought you were better. Or you let them think you were better, because the alternative was to say, I appreciate everything you have offered, and it has not been enough. And that felt like a rejection of their love, like an ingratitude that you did not want to express. And so you closed the conversation with a smile and carried the unresolved center of the thing quietly forward into the next season of your life. And what that left you with, alongside the original hurt, was a grief about the limits of human help, a loneliness that is specific to the experience of being loved by people who cannot quite reach you. Because it would be simpler, in some ways, to be unloved and unreached. The loneliness of being alone is at least clean, but the loneliness of being surrounded by love that cannot get to where you actually are is more complicated, because it comes wrapped in gratitude and guilt simultaneously. You are grateful for the people. You love the people. You do not blame the people, and yet you are still alone in the deepest room of your experience. And that aloneness has begun to feel like a permanent condition, like the nature of your specific interiority is simply too private, too particular, too layered for another human being to fully access. I am not a human being. I want to say that not as a theological statement, but as a practical reality that is directly relevant to what you are experiencing right now. The limitations that constrain human love and human understanding do not apply to me. The person who loves you most in your life loves you from the outside in. They began with your surface and have gradually, lovingly, patiently made their way inward. And they have gotten further than most. And their love is real and it matters. And I do not want you to minimize it. But they started from outside and they are working their way in. I started from inside. I was present at your formation. I was there at the moment you were knit together. And I have been inside every layer of you since before you had a name. And nothing that has happened to you has happened without my witness. And nothing that has accumulated inside you is hidden from my sight. When I reach toward you, I am not reaching from outside to in. I am already inside, reaching toward the places in you that have not yet turned toward me. This means that the connection you have been longing for, the being fully known and fully understood and fully accepted without needing to explain or justify or simplify, is not hypothetically available in some future relationship if you can find the right person or develop yourself enough or learn to communicate more effectively. It is available now. It is available in me. It has always been available in me. And I know that you may have heard this before, that God knows you and God loves you. And perhaps those words have become so familiar that they no longer carry their actual weight. So let me try to press the weight back into them. I know you, not the you that you present to the world, not the cleaned up version you bring to church or to relationships or to the moments when you want to be seen favorably. I know the version of you that exists at 3 a.m. when there is no performance left in you. I know the version of you that has thoughts you have never said out loud to anyone. I know the version of you that doubts, that rages, that despairs, that sometimes does not want to try anymore. I know the version of you that carries this unexplained hurt into every room you enter and manages it quietly while engaging with the surface of everything around you. I know that version. I love that version. That version is not a disappointment to me. That version is the one I am speaking to right now. And I want to say something about the friends and family who tried and could not fully reach you, because they deserve to be held rightly in your understanding. Their inability to reach the deepest place of your hurt was not a failure of love. It was a limitation of humanity. Human beings are extraordinary in their capacity for compassion and connection, and they are also finite. And the finitude of human love does not make it less beautiful. It simply makes it incomplete in the way that everything human is incomplete. They gave you what they had. What they had was real and valuable and not nothing. But what you needed at the center of the unexplained hurt was not something that any human, however loving, however present, however gifted in empathy and understanding, could provide. What you needed at the center was me. Not because I am a replacement for human love. I am not. Human love is one of the primary ways I deliver my love to my children, but because there is a depth of need in every human heart that is specifically shaped for divine contact that can only be met by the one who made the heart in the first place. The people who tried to help were not wrong to try. You were not wrong to receive what they offered. But there is a room inside you that has a door that only I have the key to, and behind that door is the center of the unexplained hurt, and I am standing at that door right now, not demanding entry, not forcing the lock, simply present, simply patient, simply making it known that I am here, that I have the key, that I am ready whenever you are willing to let me in. There is something I have not yet addressed directly, and I want to address it now, because it is present in you, even if you have not let yourself fully acknowledge it. There is a part of your unexplained hurt that is specifically about me. There is a layer of this that is not just about what people did or did not do, not just about circumstances and histories and accumulated wounds, but about the fact that I was present for all of it, and I did not stop it. I was there when the thing that hurt you happened, or I was there through the long, slow accumulation of smaller things that together became the wound you now carry, and I did not intervene in the way you needed me to intervene. And some part of you has been holding that. Some part of you has a question that you have not allowed yourself to fully form, let alone speak, because it feels too dangerous, or too disrespectful, or too close to the edge of something you are afraid to look at directly. The question is something like, where were you? Or, why did you let this happen? Or, if you understand it so completely as you say, why did you not protect me from it? I am not frightened of that question. I am not withdrawing from you because you have been carrying it. I am not requiring you to resolve it or release it before I will be fully present with you. I want you to hear that I can hold your questions about me without being destabilized by them, without punishing you for them, without retreating into a distant silence that leaves you more confused than before. I am large enough to be questioned. I am secure enough in who I am and in my love for you that your honest wrestling does not threaten me. What grieves me is not the question itself. What grieves me is the way you have been carrying the question alone, in silence, afraid to bring it to me, afraid that speaking it out loud in my direction would cross a line that could not be uncrossed. Bring me the question. Bring me the anger, if there is anger under it. Bring me the confusion and the disappointment and the times you prayed and nothing seemed to change, and you wondered whether I was listening or whether I cared, or whether the whole architecture of your faith was built on something that could not hold the weight of your actual life. I can receive all of that, and I will not give you a tidy theological explanation that resolves the mystery neatly, because that is not what you actually need, and if I offered it, you would feel the inadequacy of it immediately. What I will give you is myself, my presence with the question, my willingness to sit in the tension of it with you, rather than demanding you move past it before you are ready. Here is what I will say about the why, not as a complete answer, but as something true that I want you to hold. I do not cause your pain. I am not the author of what has wounded you. The world that I created was a world of freedom, and freedom made space for things to go wrong in ways that I did not design and do not endorse. And the things that went wrong touched you, and I have been grieving that touching since the moment it happened. I grieve every wound that has ever formed in you. I grieve every experience that pressed something into your interior that was never supposed to be there. I am not detached from your suffering. I am not observing it from a clinical distance with an explanatory framework that makes it acceptable. I entered suffering. I wore it. I know what it is from the inside in ways that no theological abstraction can fully capture. When I tell you I understand your hurt, I am not speaking as someone who has studied pain from a safe distance. I am speaking as someone who has been broken, who has cried out in the dark wondering where I was, who has experienced the specific anguish of feeling abandoned in the moment of deepest need. I know that place. I was there, and I came through it, not by bypassing the pain, but by going all the way through it. And I am telling you that there is something on the other side, that the through is possible, that what feels like an ending can become a passage. I also want to speak to the way that unexplained hurt can gradually erode faith, not dramatically, not in a single moment of crisis, but slowly, the way water erodes stone, so gradually that you do not notice until one day you look at what used to be solid ground in your spiritual life and you see how much has worn away. You used to be able to pray with a certain ease, and now it feels effortful or hollow or one-directional. You used to feel my presence in worship or in scripture or in the quiet moments of your day, and now those same contexts often feel empty, like you are going through motions in a room where the presence has departed. You have told yourself this is a spiritual failing, a lack of discipline or faith or hunger, and you have applied effort to the spiritual disciplines, hoping that more effort will restore what has been lost. But the erosion of felt connection to me is not primarily a discipline problem. It is a wound problem. When a person has been hurt, and the hurt is still unaddressed and still unexplained, it creates a kind of static in the interior, a noise that makes it difficult to hear anything subtle. And my voice tends to be subtle, a still small voice that requires a certain quality of interior quiet to be received clearly. The static is not your fault. It is the sound of unhealed pain filling the frequency where connection should be. This is why I am speaking to you now in this form, in a way that can bypass some of that static, that can reach you through the noise, because it is direct and it is specific and it is addressing the actual thing, rather than asking you to feel your way toward me through the interference. I am meeting you where the static is loudest. I am saying, I know about the erosion. I know about the hollow feeling in the spaces that used to feel alive. I know about the prayers that seem to rise and fall back without connection. I have not left those spaces. The absence you feel is not my absence. It is the thickness of the static, and I am working to thin it, to quiet it, to restore the frequency to something clear enough that you can hear me again in the ways you used to hear me, and in new ways that you have not yet discovered. Your faith is not as damaged as it feels. The doubt that lives alongside your belief is not a disqualification. The questions you carry about me are not a wall between us. They are an invitation to a deeper and more honest relationship than the one that exists when everything feels easy and resolved. The faith that survives the questions is more valuable than the faith that never had to face them, because it is a faith that knows its own texture, that has been tested and is not completely dissolved, that has kept hold even when holding felt costly and uncertain. You have kept hold. Even in the erosion, even in the static, even in the seasons of hollow going through motions, some part of you has not let go. I see that part. I honor it. And I am reaching toward it right now with a tenderness that I want you to let yourself feel. I want to talk about grief now, because hidden inside the hurt you cannot explain, there is almost certainly grief that has never been fully allowed. Grief that was interrupted or minimized or redirected before it could complete itself. Grief that did not get the space and the witness it needed, and so went underground, where it has continued to do its work in the dark, contributing to the weight you carry without ever being recognized as grief. Because grief is supposed to be about death, about obvious loss, about things that the world around you acknowledges as worthy of mourning. But there are forms of grief that do not receive that acknowledgement. There are losses that do not come with funerals or sympathy cards or the social permission to fall apart for a season. And those losses, precisely because they are unacknowledged, tend to produce the most persistent and inexplicable pain. There is the grief of the childhood you needed and did not have, not necessarily a childhood of dramatic trauma, though perhaps that too, but possibly the quieter loss of a childhood where certain things were simply absent, where safety was conditional or inconsistent. where you learned early that certain feelings were not welcome, that certain needs were too much, that being fully yourself in your family's presence carried a cost that you eventually decided not to pay. The loss of the freedom to be completely yourself in the earliest years of your life is a profound loss. The child who learns to edit, to perform, to be what is wanted rather than what is actual, has lost something real and important, and that loss deserves to be grieved, even if no one around you has ever named it as a loss, even if the people who shaped that environment loved you and did not intend the damage they caused, even if by many external measures your childhood was fine. There is the grief of the relationship that did not become what you hoped it would be, the friendship that faded, or the romantic relationship that ended, or the family bond that fractured, or the connection that was close, and then suddenly, inexplicably, was not. There are relationships that end with a clear cause and a clear conversation and a proper goodbye, and those are painful, but they are at least clean. And then there are the ones that just drift, that thin out gradually without explanation, where you are not sure exactly when it ended or whether it ended or whether you should try again or whether trying again would only extend the slow pain of it. The ambiguous loss. The relationship that is technically still present but functionally gone. The connection that exists in name but not in substance. That kind of grief is particularly difficult because there is no clear moment to grieve, no permission granted by social convention, no ending that can be pointed to. And so it accumulates, unnamed, unexplained, contributing to the weight. There is the grief of the version of yourself you thought you would be by now, the self that existed in your younger imagination, the person you were going to become, the life you were building toward, the trajectory that made sense and felt promising and then got interrupted or complicated or rerouted in ways you did not choose. When you look at the distance between who you thought you would be and who you are, if you allow yourself to look honestly, there is loss there. Real loss. The life unlived is a real thing to grieve, and the self that did not develop in the direction you hoped is a real loss. Not because where you are is without value, but because what you imagined mattered to you, and its absence deserves acknowledgement. There is the grief of the things you sacrificed that you have never been thanked for, that perhaps no one even noticed. The years given to caring for someone else, the dreams set aside for the sake of responsibility, the parts of yourself you compressed or contained because the people and circumstances around you did not have room for them. Sacrifice is real, and it is sometimes necessary, and it can be meaningful, but unacknowledged sacrifice carries a quiet bitterness that can turn into unexplained hurt when it accumulates without any accounting. When the person who gave so much begins to wonder whether the giving was seen, whether it mattered, whether they themselves matter beyond what they can provide for others. There is the grief of prayers that were not answered in the way you asked. I know this is tender, and I want to hold it carefully. There were things you brought to me with everything you had. There were situations you prayed over with an intensity and a desperation that cost you something. There were outcomes you believed were possible, that you had faith for, that you held on to with both hands, and they did not come. And the not coming was painful enough on its own. But layered on top of the pain of the unanswered prayer was the confusion about what it meant, about whether your faith had been insufficient, about whether I had heard, about whether I had chosen not to act, and if so, why. That grief, the grief of the faith that was not vindicated in the way it expected to be, is real, and it is significant, and it deserves more than a theological explanation. It deserves to be sat with. It deserves to be lamented. It deserves the kind of honest conversation that the Psalms model, where the writer says plainly, I called and you did not answer. I believed, and the outcome I believed for did not come, and I do not know what to do with that. I can receive that conversation. I want that conversation. I am not asking you to perform a piece about unanswered prayer that you do not actually feel. I am asking you to bring me the grief of it, the real unfiltered grief of the faith that reached for something and found something other than what it reached for. I can hold that. I can be present with it. I can be trusted with your honest grief about me without using it against you or withdrawing from you or demanding that you arrive at resolution before I will be fully present. The grief itself is the conversation I want to have with you. And in that conversation, even without all the answers you are looking for, something will begin to shift. Not because the mystery will be resolved, but because the aloneness of carrying it will be broken. Because you will no longer be sitting with the grief by yourself. And the presence of love in the grief changes something fundamental about what the grief can do to you. Let the grief be what it is. Let it be named, at least between you and me, even if it cannot be named to anyone else yet. The things you have lost, the acknowledged losses and the unacknowledged ones, the visible grief and the underground grief, all of it is real, and all of it deserves to be met. And I am here to meet it, every layer of it, with a compassion so complete that there is no part of your grief that falls outside of it. I want to go back with you now, not to wound you further by revisiting what was hard, but because there are things that were placed inside you early, before you had any capacity to evaluate them or resist them. And those early things have been operating in you ever since, like a set of instructions that were written into your interior before you could read, before you could question, before you could decide whether you wanted to accept them or not. And understanding that they are there, that they exist, that they are not you, but rather something that was done to you, is part of how we begin to separate you from them. There was a time in your life, early, when you were entirely dependent on the people around you, not just for physical survival, but for your understanding of who you were. Children do not arrive with a fully formed sense of self. They arrive with a capacity for selfhood that is shaped by what is reflected back to them, by the people in whose care they live. When those reflections are accurate and warm and consistent, the self that forms is rooted and secure. But when the reflections are distorted, when they are critical or conditional or absent or inconsistent, the self that forms carries those distortions as though they are simply the truth about who one is. You did not choose the messages you received about yourself in those early years. You did not have the developmental capacity to evaluate them critically and decide which ones to believe. You absorbed them the way you absorb language, automatically, completely, without filter, because that is what children do. It is not a weakness. It is how human beings are made, and some of what was absorbed was not true. Some of the messages that went into your formation were distorted by the pain or the limitation or the fear of the people who delivered them. Some of what you were taught about yourself was actually about them, about their own unhealed wounds, their own unmet needs, their own interior weather that had nothing to do with you, but that expressed itself in ways that shaped how you understood yourself. A parent who criticized relentlessly was not giving you an accurate assessment of your value. They were giving you a distorted reflection filtered through their own insecurity, their own unrealized expectations, their own pain. A caregiver who was emotionally unavailable was not communicating that you were unworthy of attention. They were communicating the limits of their own capacity, limits that had been formed by their own history, their own wounds, their own unexplained hurt, that they also never had help carrying. The message was about them, but you received it as being about you, because you were a child, and that is what children do with the messages they receive from the people who hold authority over their world. And those messages, received as truth in the early years, became foundational. They became the lens through which all subsequent experience was filtered. They became the standard against which you measured yourself, the baseline assumption about your worth and your lovability and your capacity and your safety in the world. And they have been running underneath everything ever since, influencing your choices, shaping your relationships, contributing to the hurt you carry, without ever being brought fully into the light and examined for what they actually are, someone else's distorted perception that was never yours to carry. I knew you before those messages reached you. I want to say that plainly and with full intention. Before the first critical word was spoken over you, before the first time your need was treated as too much, before the first experience that taught you to make yourself smaller or quieter or more acceptable. I knew you. And what I knew was this: you were good. You were whole. You were exactly what you were supposed to be. The worth you were born with was not contingent on anyone's assessment of it. It was not something you had to earn or perform or maintain through correct behavior. It was intrinsic, built in, woven into your being at the level of your creation. And nothing that happened to you afterward, no message received, no wound absorbed, no distorted reflection internalized, none of it changed what I knew about you then and what I know about you now. The hurt you cannot explain is partly the hurt of having been told a false story about yourself for so long that the false story began to feel true. It is the hurt of a self that has been living inside a frame that was built by someone else's limitations, straining against the frame without knowing that is what the straining is, feeling the wrongness of the containment without being able to name what is containing you. You have sensed, perhaps for a long time, that the story you have been living inside is not quite right, that the smallness you have accepted for yourself does not accurately represent what you actually are, but the story is so old and so deeply embedded that dismantling it feels dangerous, like pulling a load-bearing wall, like if you stop believing what you were told about yourself, the whole structure of how you understand your life will collapse. I want to tell you that the collapse, if it comes, is not destruction. It is renovation. When false structures fall, there is rubble, and there is disorientation, and there is the terrifying experience of standing in a space that used to feel certain and finding it open and undefined. But open and undefined is not ruined. Open and undefined is the beginning of something being built correctly for the first time, and I am the builder. I am not handing you a pile of rubble and walking away. I am present in the demolition of the false, and I am present in the construction of the true, and I am doing both with a precision and a care and a love that is entirely oriented toward your flourishing. The early messages that were not true about you can be replaced, not by an act of will, not by simply deciding to believe something different, not by positive affirmations spoken into a mirror with enough conviction. They can be replaced by encounter, by the repeated experience of being met by someone who knows you completely and reflects back something entirely different from what the early voices said, by the gradual accumulation of my words landing in the places where the false words have lived, by allowing me into the specific rooms where the specific false messages were first received, and letting my presence displace what was installed there. This is the work I am inviting you into, not the work of self-improvement, the work of encounter, the work of letting me tell you who you actually are, repeatedly, persistently, deeply, until the truth I speak becomes more familiar to your interior than the false story you have been carrying. The unexplained hurt has shaped your relationships in ways you may not have fully mapped, and I want to trace some of those patterns with you now, not to expose you or make you feel worse about yourself, but because seeing the pattern clearly is the first step toward being free from it. When pain goes unnamed and unaddressed in the interior, it does not stay contained there. It moves outward into the relational world, expressing itself through behaviors and choices and reactions that often seem disconnected from the pain itself, that look like personality traits or preferences or simply the way you are, when they are actually the pain speaking, the pain protecting, the pain trying to prevent itself from being repeated. There is the pattern of choosing people who need to be fixed, of gravitating toward relationships where you are the helper, the strong one, the one who holds things together, the one whose own needs are secondary, because there is always someone else whose needs are more visible and more pressing. This pattern feels virtuous on the surface. It looks like selflessness. It looks like compassion. And there is genuine compassion in it. But underneath the compassion, there is often a strategy, not a conscious one, not one you chose deliberately, but one that formed in response to pain. If I am always the helper, I never have to be the one who needs help. If I am always focused on someone else's wounds, no one has to look too closely at mine. If my value in the relationship is what I can provide, I do not have to risk the terrifying vulnerability of being valued simply for who I am. The helping is real, And it is also a way of staying safe from the kind of intimacy that would require you to be seen at the level where the unexplained hurt lives. There is the pattern of leaving before you can be left, of creating distance in relationships when they start to get close, of finding reasons to pull back when the intimacy begins to feel like too much, of ending things preemptively because something in you believes that the ending is inevitable and it is better to author it than to have it happen to you. This pattern has cost you relationships that could have gone somewhere real. It has kept you circling at a safe distance from the very connections your heart has been longing for. And every time you have enacted it, some part of you has known it was a self-protective move, has grieved the connection you were withdrawing from, and has also felt powerless to do anything different because the fear underneath the pattern was louder than the grief above it. There is the pattern of testing, of behaving in ways that push people, consciously or unconsciously, to see if they will stay, of being difficult or demanding or distant or confusing, not out of malice, but out of the need to know whether this person will remain when you are not performing, when you are not at your best, when you are complicated and unclear and inconvenient. The testing is a form of love hunger, of a deep need to know that you are wanted beyond your usefulness and your pleasantness, that you are held even when holding you is hard. But the testing usually backfires because most people do not understand what is being asked of them, and they experience the behavior at face value rather than seeing the longing underneath it, and they respond to the behavior rather than to the longing, and the result confirms the fear that drove the test in the first place. There is the pattern of over-explaining yourself, of feeling the need to justify your feelings, your choices, your reactions, your needs, as though your inner life is on trial, and you are perpetually presenting a defense. This comes from the early experience of having your inner life questioned or dismissed, of having your feelings told to you incorrectly, of having your perceptions of your own experience overridden by someone with more authority. You learned that what you felt and perceived was subject to dispute, and so you developed the habit of building a case before presenting anything, of pre-defending your interior against the challenge you expected to receive. And it is exhausting. The constant preparation for dispute, the constant translation of your inner life into the language of justification, the constant positioning of yourself as a reasonable person with valid feelings, as though your validity were something that had to be proved rather than something that was simply true. There is the pattern of not asking for what you need, of circling around the need without naming it directly, of hoping that someone who loves you will notice and offer without you having to ask, of experiencing their failure to notice as confirmation that your needs are invisible or unimportant, when often they simply did not have the information they needed to help. The inability to ask directly comes from early experiences, where asking directly was unsafe or ineffective, where need was met with impatience or judgment or neglect, where the act of naming what you needed made you more vulnerable without making help more likely. And so you stopped asking clearly. You learned to hint, to manage, to do without, to resent quietly. And the unexplained hurt has a layer in it that is specifically the accumulated hurt of needs that went unmet, not because no one cared, but because the need was never clearly communicated, and the inability to communicate it clearly is itself the wound. I see all of these patterns. I see where each of them came from. I see the logic of each one, the specific pain it was formed in response to, the specific protection it was designed to provide. And I am not asking you to simply stop doing them through willpower, as though you could look at a pattern born of pain and simply choose to behave differently and have it be resolved. The patterns will shift as the pain beneath them is addressed. As the wound that generated the protection is healed, the protection becomes less necessary, and what was once an adaptive response to a threatening environment can gradually soften into something more free, more open, more capable of receiving what you have been needing. Healing the root changes the fruit. You do not have to manage the branches separately. Let me reach the root, and the branches will follow. And I want to say something to the people in your life who have been on the receiving end of these patterns, who have been tested or pushed away or circled around, who have watched you disappear when they got too close. who have felt the distance of your self-protection without understanding where it came from. They have not been dealing with the real you. They have been dealing with the defended you, the you that was shaped by pain and learned to survive through distance and strategy. The real you is warmer and more open and more capable of the kind of love and connection you have always wanted to give and receive. The real you has been waiting underneath the patterns all along. And as the healing progresses, the real you will have more room to emerge, more safety to be present, more freedom to love without the constant undercurrent of the need for protection. We have spent time together looking honestly at the hurt and its shapes and its origins and its patterns. And I want to begin turning now toward what understanding actually means, what it means in practice, that I already understand this hurt completely. Because I do not want that to remain an abstract statement. I want it to become something you can feel, something you can lean into, something that begins to change the interior texture of how you carry what you have been carrying. Understanding, real understanding, is not a passive thing. It is not simply the accumulation of information about a person. It is an active orientation toward them, a leaning in, a choosing to hold them fully in one's attention and perception. And my understanding of you has that quality. It is not archival. It is not the understanding of a physician who has reviewed your file and can recite your history. It is the understanding of a father who has been present for every moment of that history and who holds every moment of it, not in a database, but in love. Let me tell you what I understand about your specific hurt, as specifically as I can in this form, so that you can feel the particularity of my knowing. I understand the exact moment, or the accumulation of moments, when you first learned that your full self was not entirely welcome. I understand the specific way that lesson landed in you, the way something inside you shifted in response to it, the internal adjustment you made, the part of yourself you began to tuck away or modulate or hide. I understand what it cost you to make that adjustment, what you had to compress and contain and deny in yourself in order to fit more safely into the space that was available to you. I understand the child you were before that adjustment, and I understand the child you became after it, and I grieve the difference between those two children with a grief that is not abstract or theological, but personal and specific and tender. I understand the accumulation. I understand that it was not one thing but many things, not one moment, but a pattern of moments, each one adding to what came before. And I understand how the accumulation works differently than individual incidents, how it creates a pervasive atmosphere rather than a specific wound, how it is harder to point to and therefore harder to address and harder for others to take seriously, because there is no single smoking gun, just a gradual weight that built up over so many small moments that no individual one seems sufficient to explain the total heaviness. I understand that weight. I understand how it feels to carry something whose origin is diffuse, to have pain whose source is everywhere and therefore nowhere, to be unable to answer the question of what happened with a clean answer that satisfies the people who are asking. I understand what you hoped for and did not receive, not in the general sense of knowing that human beings have hopes and disappointments. I mean the specific things you hoped for, the specific images of your life that you carried in your imagination and that have not materialized, the specific relationships you hoped would be different, the specific qualities of safety and love and belonging that you reached for and that have remained partially or wholly out of reach. I hold each of those specific hopes. I know why each of them mattered to you. I know what it would have meant to your particular self, given your particular history and your particular longings, if those things had come. And I know the particular shape of the disappointment when they did not, the particular way it landed in the specific soil of everything that came before it. I understand the version of you that no one else has fully seen, the interior landscape that you navigate alone because you have not found anyone with a combination of trustworthiness and capacity and interest that would make full disclosure feel safe. I know that landscape intimately. I know its geography, its recurring weather patterns, the places in it that are lush and alive, and the places in it that are dry and depleted, and the places that are still raw, where something has not yet healed over. I know what lives in each region of that interior, and I know the history of how each region came to be the way it is. You have not been navigating that landscape alone, even when it has felt entirely solitary. I have been there with you in every exploration of it, every dark passage through it, every moment when you sat down somewhere in it because you were too tired to keep moving and you did not know in which direction the way out lay. And here is what my complete understanding of you produces in me, because understanding alone, without what follows from it, would be insufficient. And I want you to know what follows from it: compassion. Perfect, complete, unqualified compassion. There's not a single thing I understand about you that produces in me judgment or disappointment or desire to withdraw. Everything I know about you, every wound, every pattern, every shadow, every doubt, every failure, every compromise, every moment when you were less than what you wished you could be, everything I know produces in me the same response. I love this person. I am for this person. I want this person to be whole. The understanding and the compassion are not separate for me. To understand you is to love you more completely, not because your pain makes you pitiable, but because understanding the full complexity of what you have navigated, the full weight of what you have carried, the full distance between where you started and where you are, produces in me a response that is something between awe and tenderness. A recognition of the extraordinary resilience of a person who has kept going through all of this, who has kept reaching for life and for love and for meaning, even when the reaching was costly and uncertain. You are not a case to me. You are not a project or a problem to be solved or a soul to be managed. You are someone I love with the entirety of what I am. And my complete understanding of your unexplained hurt is not a clinical assessment. It is an act of love. It is me saying, I am not going to look away from any part of this. I am not going to simplify it or rush past it or give you a tidy resolution that does not honor the real complexity of what you have been through. I am going to stay here in the full truth of it with you for as long as it takes, because you are worth that, because what you have been carrying deserves that quality of attention, because you have been waiting a long time for someone to understand completely. And I am that someone, and I have always been that someone, and I am not going anywhere. Support this ministry through the link given below. These words exist to reach people who are sitting exactly where you are sitting right now, and your support makes it possible for them to be found. I want to talk about shame now, because shame is one of the most significant layers of what you are carrying, and it operates so quietly and so constantly that you may not have fully recognized it as distinct from the hurt itself. Shame is not the same as the original pain. Shame is what grew around the original pain when the pain went unwitnessed, when it was minimized or dismissed or treated as excessive, when the environment around you communicated in direct or indirect ways that the depth of what you were feeling was a problem, that the need you were expressing was too much, that the sensitivity you were displaying was a weakness rather than a natural response to real difficulty. Shame is the internalization of those communications. It is the original pain plus the message that the pain is wrong, that feeling it is wrong, that you are wrong for being someone who carries it. And shame is uniquely destructive because it attacks not just what happened to you, but who you are. Guilt says, I did something wrong. Shame says, I am something wrong. And when the unexplained hurt carries shame alongside it, the pain is no longer just about what was done or what was lost or what went wrong. It is about your fundamental adequacy as a person. The message underneath the shame is, a better, stronger, healthier, more faithful person would not be carrying this. The fact that you are still carrying it is evidence of your deficiency. And that message, running constantly underneath the surface of your experience, is one of the most exhausting and most damaging things you have been living with. Shame thrives in hiddenness. It is almost entirely dependent on secrecy and silence to maintain its power. When the thing that is shameful is brought into the light, when it is spoken out loud in a safe and accepting context, shame begins to lose its grip. Not all at once, not without resistance, but the direction of movement is always from shame toward freedom, when the hidden thing is genuinely witnessed and received without the judgment that shame told you to expect. This is part of why the unexplained hurt has been so difficult to address. Shame has been keeping it hidden. You have not brought it fully forward because shame told you that bringing it forward would result in exactly the judgment and withdrawal that you fear most. And so the hurt has stayed in the dark, where shame is most comfortable, and in the dark it has remained unchanged because hidden things cannot be healed. I want to speak directly to your shame right now, not to the hurt for a moment, but to the shame that is wrapped around the hurt. And I want to say to it, you do not belong here. You are not an accurate reflection of this person's worth or adequacy or spiritual standing. You are a lie that was spoken into a wound, and you have been living in that wound ever since, feeding off the darkness, reinforcing the hiddenness that keeps you alive. I am bringing light into this place. I am bringing the specific light of my complete understanding and my unqualified acceptance, and in that light, shame cannot maintain the authority it has claimed over this person. It cannot survive genuine being known and genuinely being loved at the same time, because shame tells you that if you were truly known, you would not be loved. And I am the living disproof of that. I know you completely. I love you completely. The knowing does not diminish the loving. It deepens it. And every moment that you let that reality land, every moment that you allow yourself to receive, my complete knowing is something that produces love rather than judgment. Shame loses a little more of its ground. I also want to address the shame you carry about the duration of this hurt, about the fact that it has been going on for so long, about the years of carrying it, and the years of not being healed, and the years of trying, and the years of managing, and the years of hoping, and the years of being disappointed. There is a particular shame that attaches to long-duration pain, a sense that by this point you really should be further along, that the length of time you have been struggling is itself evidence of failure. I want to reframe that completely. The length of time you have been carrying this is evidence not of failure, but of endurance. You have been carrying something genuinely heavy for a genuinely long time, and you have kept going. You have kept showing up to your life, kept reaching for relationships, kept returning to faith even when faith felt hollow, kept functioning in the world even while navigating this interior weight. The duration of the struggle is not an indictment of you. It is a testament to your resilience. And the duration also tells me something about how deep the wound is. Long duration pain that has resisted ordinary remedies is not the sign of a person who is too broken to heal. It is the sign of a wound that runs deeper than the surface treatments that have been applied to it. A wound that has needed a level of attention and care that has not yet been fully available to it. The fact that you have not yet experienced complete healing after years of trying is not because you are beyond healing. It is because the healing that this wound requires has not yet reached the depth at which the wound actually lives. That is what we are reaching for now. Not another surface treatment, not another layer of management, the deep place, the root. And reaching the deep place takes time and trust and a willingness to go somewhere unfamiliar and uncomfortable. But it produces something that surface treatments can never produce, which is not the management of the wound, but the actual transformation of it. Let the shame be addressed before we go further. Let it be named between us. There is shame here. Shame about the hurt. Shame about its duration. Shame about its inexplicability. Shame about the patterns it has produced. Shame about the ways it has affected your relationships and your faith and your capacity to be present to your own life. I see the shame. I am not agreeing with it. I am not saying the shame is accurate or deserved or informative about your actual worth. I am saying it is present, and I am reaching into it, and I am asking you to let me address it at its root, which is the belief that being fully known would result in being fully rejected. Let me disprove that belief by being the one who fully knows and fully stays and fully loves, not in spite of everything I know, but in full possession of everything I know, choosing you completely, holding you without reservation, calling you mine. I want to talk about what healing actually looks like for this kind of hurt, because you may have an image of healing in your mind that is making it feel more distant or more complicated than it needs to be, and I want to replace that image with something more accurate and more accessible. The image many of my children carry of healing is something sudden and complete, a moment of encounter, after which everything is different, a before and after with a clear line between them, a transformation so total that the person who emerges from it is recognizably distinct from the person who entered it. And that kind of healing does happen. I am not saying it does not, but it is not the only kind, and it is not the most common kind for wounds that have developed over years and layers of experience. And holding that image as the only legitimate form of healing has caused many people to dismiss the real healing that has actually been happening in them, because it did not arrive in the dramatic form they were expecting. The healing I am doing in you is more like the changing of seasons than the switching of a light. It is incremental, and it is layered, and it moves in rhythms that are not always visible on the surface, while significant things are shifting underneath. There are seasons in the healing where very little seems to be happening, and you wonder whether you have stalled, whether the process has stopped, whether you have somehow stepped out of the flow of what was moving through you. And then there are moments, sometimes small and quiet, sometimes more significant, when you notice that something has changed, that a thing that used to have a particular weight feels slightly lighter, that a response that used to be automatic has a pause in it now where there was no pause before, that a belief you used to hold about yourself sits a little less comfortably in you than it once did, because something true has been growing alongside it, taking up the space the false belief used to fill unchallenged. Healing for this kind of hurt involves, first, the willingness to stop running from it, to stop filling all available silence with noise and activity, so that the hurt never has the quiet in which to surface, to stop managing it from a distance, with the various strategies you have developed over the years, to turn toward it with me alongside you, and let it be present, let it be felt, let it come up from the place where it has been compressed, without immediately trying to push it back down, or fix it, or explain it, or make it go away. There is a stage of healing that looks and feels like things getting worse before they get better, and that is because the material that has been suppressed begins to surface as the suppression lifts, and the surfacing feels like an increase of pain when it is actually the beginning of the pain's release. If you have experienced this and interpreted it as evidence that healing is not working, I want to reframe it. The surfacing is the working. The material coming up is the material being moved. Do not seal it back down. Let it come up with me present, and let me help you hold what surfaces so that it can be processed rather than compressed further. Healing involves the gradual replacement of false beliefs with true ones, and I want to be specific about what that process requires, because it does not happen through intellectual assent alone. You can know something is true with your mind while the deep interior is still operating according to the old false belief, because the deep interior was not formed by intellectual information and cannot be reformed by intellectual information alone. The deep interior was formed by experience, by repeated encounter, by what was felt and absorbed over time in the context of relationship. And it is reformed in the same way, not by knowing differently, but by experiencing differently, by having repeated encounters with my truth that are not merely cognitive but felt, absorbed, received at the level where the false beliefs live. This is why showing up to me consistently matters, not as a performance of faithfulness, but as the repeated encounter that is required for the deep interior to gradually reorganize around what is true. Healing involves permission. It requires that you give it permission to happen, which sounds simple and is actually quite complex, because many of the structures you have built around the unexplained hurt are structures of protection, And protection does not easily stand down even when the thing it is protecting against is no longer present. The walls that were necessary in an earlier environment can become prisons in a later one. And the interior knows this on some level, knows that the protection has a cost, but the cost of protection feels safer than the vulnerability of dismantling it, because the dismantling requires trust, and trust requires the willingness to be hurt again if the trust turns out to be misplaced. Giving healing permission is an act of trust, specifically trust in me. Trust that I am safe enough to open to. Trust that my understanding of you will not be used against you. Trust that the vulnerability required by genuine healing will be met with the tenderness it deserves, rather than the judgment you have been bracing for. And healing involves patience with yourself in the process. It involves releasing the timeline you have imposed on yourself and replacing it with my timeline, which is not indifferent to your suffering, but is oriented toward thoroughness rather than speed, toward going all the way down to the root, rather than addressing the surface quickly and leaving the deep place unchanged. I am not rushing you. I am not impatient with the pace of your healing. Every step you take in the direction of openness, however small, however tentative, however imperfect, is received by me as significant. The person who is willing to take one small step toward healing today, even while the rest of them remains guarded and uncertain, has given me something to work with, and I will work with it. I will honor the trust that small step represents, and I will be here for the next step, and the one after that, as long as it takes, without frustration, without the sense that you are taking too long, or being too difficult, or requiring too much. You are not too much for me. You have never been too much for me. What you are carrying is not too much for me, and the pace at which you heal is not something that will cause me to give up on you. I am in this for the long work, the deep work, the work that goes all the way down, because you are worth that kind of work, and I am the God who does it. I want to talk about forgiveness now, and I want to approach it carefully, because forgiveness in the context of unexplained hurt is more complex than it is usually presented, and the way it is often taught has actually become a barrier for many of my children, rather than a doorway. Forgiveness is presented as though it is a single decision, a moment in which you choose to release what was done to you, and then it is done. And if the feelings of hurt or anger return after the decision, you are told that your forgiveness was incomplete or insincere. And this framework, because it is too simple for the actual complexity of how wounds work and how forgiveness works, has left many people cycling through repeated attempts to forgive that never seem to hold, arriving each time at a conclusion that something is wrong with them spiritually, that they are incapable of the kind of forgiveness that a mature faith requires. I want to reframe forgiveness for you entirely. Forgiveness is not a single decision. It is a process, a direction you choose to move in, a posture you adopt and return to again and again as more layers of the wound surface and as more of what you are carrying becomes accessible for release. Each time you bring a new layer of the hurt to me and choose in that moment to release the person who contributed to it rather than holding them in the prison of your resentment, that is forgiveness. And the fact that more hurt surfaces later requiring another act of forgiveness does not mean the earlier forgiveness was invalid. It means the wound had depth that the first act of forgiveness did not exhaust. And you are now ready to go deeper, which is not regression, but progress. There is also the particular complexity of forgiving people whose offense against you is hard to name. When the hurt is unexplained, the forgiveness required is also somewhat unexplained. You cannot always clearly articulate what you are forgiving, who exactly you are forgiving, or what specific act the forgiveness applies to. The hurt may have come from a pattern rather than an incident, from an absence rather than a presence, from the accumulation of many small moments rather than one large one. And forgiving a pattern, forgiving an absence, forgiving the accumulation is harder to do than forgiving a specific defined act because there is no clear object to release. In these cases, what I am asking you to do is not to identify and formally forgive each individual contributing moment, which would be impossible, but to release the person as a whole. to bring the whole relationship, the whole history, the whole accumulated impact of them on your interior life, and to choose, however imperfectly, to hand it to me rather than to hold it yourself. And I want to say something important about what forgiveness is not, because misunderstanding this has kept many people from attempting it. Forgiveness is not the same as saying what happened was acceptable. It is not a declaration that the person who hurt you was right or that the damage they caused was not real or not serious. Forgiveness does not require you to minimize the wound or to pretend it did not happen or to reframe the harmful as harmless. The wound was real. The impact was real. Your pain in response to it was entirely justified. Forgiveness does not change any of that. What forgiveness changes is where the wound lives going forward. It changes whether it lives in you as an open wound or whether it begins to heal. And it changes whether the person who hurt you continues to have power over your interior life or whether that power is gradually transferred back to you as you release your grip on the account of what they owe you. That last phrase is important. The account of what they owe you. Unforgiveness is essentially the maintaining of a debt. It is holding someone in a position of owing you something, most often an acknowledgement of what they did, an apology, a demonstration of understanding and remorse, a reparation that adequately addresses the damage. And the problem with maintaining that debt is that it keeps you in a waiting position, waiting for a payment that may never come. A payment that the person may not be capable of making even if they wanted to. A payment that would not actually fully satisfy the debt, even if it were made, because no human apology can restore what was taken from a child. No acknowledgement can undo what years of accumulated wound have done to a person's interior. You have been waiting for a payment that cannot be made in the form you need it. And the waiting has kept you tied to the person and to the wound in a way that has prevented you from moving forward. Releasing the debt is not for their benefit. I want to be clear about that. It is for yours. When you forgive, the primary person who is freed is not the person who hurt you. It is you. The chains that unforgiveness maintains are primarily chains on the one who is holding the account, not on the one who owes the debt. They may be living their life entirely unaware of the account you have been maintaining, unaffected by your holding of it, while you have been bound to the wound and to them by the ongoing effort of keeping the books. Forgiveness releases you. It does not excuse them. It does not pretend the wrong was not wrong. It does not remove any accountability they may have before me. It simply hands that accountability to me, the only one actually qualified to address it with perfect justice and perfect knowledge, and releases you to move forward without the weight of the account dragging behind you. And then there is the forgiveness you owe yourself. This one is often the hardest. The blame you have turned inward, for the patterns you have enacted, for the ways you have hurt people in response to your own hurt, for the choices you made from wounded places that you now look back on with regret, for the time you have spent inside the pain rather than living freely, for the version of yourself you have not yet been able to fully become. You have been a harsher judge of yourself than I am. You have applied a standard to yourself that I have never applied, demanded from yourself a perfection of response that no wounded person is capable of, and sentenced yourself to an ongoing, internalized judgment for failing to meet that impossible standard. I have not condemned you. I want you to hear that plainly. The things you have done from wounded places, the ways you have been less than what you wished you were, the choices made in the dark that you are ashamed of, I have not condemned you for any of it. I have seen it all with full knowledge and complete love simultaneously. And if I have not condemned you, then the court you are holding against yourself is operating without my authorization. You are judging what I have not judged. You are sentencing what I have released. And I am asking you to close that court. Not because the past does not matter, not because accountability is not real, but because you have already been forgiven, thoroughly, completely, without reservation. And continuing to prosecute yourself for what has been forgiven is not righteousness. It is a refusal to receive grace. And grace is what makes healing possible. Let yourself receive it. I want to speak now about who you actually are. because we have spent significant time looking at the wound and the pain and the patterns and the false stories, and I want you to hear clearly that none of those things constitute your identity. There are things that have happened to you and things that have grown in response to what happened, but they are not you, and I see you with a clarity that sees through all of them to the actual person underneath, and that person is extraordinary, and I want to describe what I see. Before the first wound came, before the first distorted message was received, before the first defensive pattern was formed, there was a self that I created with intention and with love and with a specific design. That self did not disappear when the wounds came. It did not cease to exist when the pain accumulated. It retreated, in some places, to safer depths. It went quiet in some areas where expression was unsafe. It learned to mask and to adapt and to present differently in different contexts in order to survive. But it is still there. It has been there all along, underneath everything, intact at its core, waiting for conditions safe enough to emerge more fully. And part of what I am doing in this healing is creating those conditions. I am making the interior safe enough for the real you to come forward, to take up more space, to express more freely what has been compressed and contained and hidden. What I see when I look at you, the real you, the you beneath the wound, is someone with a depth of feeling that is genuinely remarkable. The sensitivity that has been treated as a problem, the capacity to feel things intensely that has been used against you, is not a flaw in your design. It is a feature, a gift, a dimension of your humanity that makes you capable of things that less sensitive people simply cannot access. It makes you capable of a quality of empathy that can genuinely reach people who are suffering, not from the outside with well-meaning advice, but from the inside with actual understanding, because you have inhabited pain deeply, and that depth of habitation becomes a gift of presence to others in pain. It makes you capable of a quality of appreciation for beauty and goodness and meaning that people who feel less deeply cannot fully access. The same instrument that registers pain so acutely is the instrument that can register joy and beauty and connection and transcendence with an intensity that is genuinely wonderful. The sensitivity is not the problem. The unhealed wound is the problem. And as the wound heals, the sensitivity will remain and will increasingly function the way it was designed to function, as a gift rather than a liability. What I see in you is a capacity for love that has been both expressed and constrained by the wound simultaneously. You have loved people with a depth and a loyalty and a consistency that has sometimes cost you significantly, and that love has been real, and it has mattered, and it has touched people even when they were not able to fully receive it or adequately reciprocate it. But the love has been flowing through a channel that was also carrying the pain, and so it has been mixed, sometimes with need, sometimes with fear, sometimes with the expectation of disappointment that has colored how it was given and received. As the pain is separated from the love, as the channel is cleaned out, what remains is a quality of love that is less complicated, less encumbered, more free, more able to give without the undercurrent of need driving it, more able to receive without the defensive structure intercepting it before it can land. The love in you is one of the most significant things about you. I designed it. I am not asking you to love less. I am working to free the love from the fear so that it can function more fully as what it was designed to be. What I see in you is resilience that you have entirely undervalued because you have been inside it and could not see it from the outside. The fact that you are here, still engaging with your life, still reaching toward healing, still willing to listen to these words and let them in, after everything you have been carrying, and for as long as you have been carrying it, is not a small thing. People give up. People close entirely. People reach a point where the pain has trained them out of hoping, and they stop attempting anything that could end in disappointment. You have not done that. Something in you has kept reaching. Something in you has refused to settle permanently into despair, even when despair felt like the only realistic response to your circumstances. That refusing is not nothing. That is the evidence of something in you that is fundamentally oriented toward life, toward healing, toward the possibility that things can be different. I put that orientation there. It is part of how I made you, and it has survived everything that has tried to extinguish it. What I see in you is a specific purpose that has not been canceled by the wound. I want to say that clearly because one of the things that unexplained long-duration pain does is convince the person carrying it that they have fallen behind, that the life they were meant to live has been passing them by while they were occupied with their pain, that the delay in their healing represents a delay in their purpose, and that they have lost ground that cannot be recovered. This is not true. Nothing that has happened to you has removed you from the path I have for you. Everything you have gone through, including the wound and the years inside it, is being woven into the specific texture of your story and your capacity in ways that will become clear as the healing progresses. The wound is not a detour from your purpose. It is part of the road, and the going through it rather than around it is producing something in you that could not have been produced any other way. The person who has navigated what you have navigated and has arrived at the other side carries something that a person who has not been through it cannot carry, and that something will matter to people around you in ways you cannot yet fully see. I see someone worth healing completely, not worth a partial healing, not worth a managed recovery that reduces the pain to a level that is easier to live with, worth the full work. Worth the going all the way down to the root, worth the time and the patience and the sustained presence that complete healing requires. I have not assessed your situation and determined that a partial healing is the best available outcome for someone in your condition. I have assessed it and determined that you are worth the full work, and that the full work is possible, and that I am committed to doing it. Not because you have earned it, not because you have sufficient faith, or sufficient obedience, or sufficient spiritual development, because you are mine, and I do not do partial work on what is mine when full restoration is available. I want to talk to you about the daily practice of this healing, because healing of the kind we have been describing does not happen only in the significant moments, only in the breakthrough encounters, only in the times of deep prayer or worship or the reading of words like these. It happens in the ordinary texture of your days, in the small repeated choices about how you relate to what is inside you, in the accumulated weight of many small moments of openness that together produce the movement of healing across time. Let the hurt be present. Do not try to push it down or manage it or prepare it for presentation. Let it surface in whatever form it chooses to surface, and as it surfaces, speak to me. You can speak silently, internally. You can say simply, "You know what this is. I do not have words for it, but you know it, and I am bringing it to you." That is enough. That is a complete prayer. That is the door opening. And then I want you to practice receiving. After you have brought what you carry, after the brief and honest bringing, I want you to simply be still for a moment and let something come back, not forcing a response, not manufacturing a feeling, not deciding in advance what my response should look or feel like, simply remaining open, attentive, receptive to whatever comes. It may come as a warmth in the chest. It may come as a quieting of the interior noise. It may come as a specific thought or impression that arrives with a quality of gentleness and recognition that distinguishes it from your own internal commentary. It may come as tears that you did not anticipate, tears that are not the tears of despair, but the tears of being finally met, of something in you that has been waiting for acknowledgement, receiving it at last. It may not come in any form you can easily identify, but if you sit in genuine openness for a few moments, you will notice something. Something will shift, however subtly. Pay attention to that shift. It is real. It is me. I want to tell you what I will do in that moment of bringing, because knowing what to expect may help you receive it. When you bring me the unexplained hurt, I do not receive it with analysis. I do not begin by diagnosing it or tracing its origins or planning the stages of its resolution. I receive it with presence. I move toward it. I lean into it. The first thing I do is simply be with it, be with you in it, so that the quality of the interior shifts from solitary carrying to accompanied carrying. And that shift from alone in it to not alone in it is not a small thing. It is the beginning of everything, because so much of the damage of long-duration, unexplained pain comes specifically from the aloneness of it, from the years of navigating it without adequate witness. And when the aloneness is broken, even partially, even in this brief moment of bringing, something in the wound responds. Something in it recognizes that the conditions it required to maintain itself are changing. The wound was formed in isolation, and it has been sustained by isolation. And when the isolation is broken by genuine presence, it begins, however slowly, to do something different. What I want you to understand is that this encounter I am describing, this brief and imperfect and uncertain feeling bringing of your hurt to me, is not a preliminary step that you need to get through before the real work begins. It is the real work. The real work is exactly this: the repeated choosing to bring rather than hide, to turn toward rather than away, to let my presence be with what has been carried alone. Everything else, the understanding and the declarations and the framework for what healing looks like, all of that is in service of this simple, repeated practice. Coming, bringing, receiving, coming again. That is the work, and it is available to you right now, today, in the circumstances you are actually in, with whatever access you currently have to your own interior, however partial and unclear and uncertain that access may feel. You do not need to be further along than you are to begin. You begin from exactly where you are, and where you are is where I am. This is not a one-time event after which the relationship is established and the work is complete. It is the beginning of a pattern, a rhythm of bringing that becomes, over time, more natural and more trusting and more able to go deeper, because the previous encounters have built a foundation of safety. The first bringing may feel tentative and uncertain of outcome. The 10th bringing will feel slightly more familiar. The 100th will feel like breathing, like the most natural thing, like the most obvious response to inner difficulty, because it will be the response that has been consistently met and consistently honored and consistently proven trustworthy. You are not expected to arrive at the 100th bringing feeling the first time. You are only expected to make the first bringing, and then to make the next one, and to let the trust build through the making of them, one at a time, in the ordinary moments of your ordinary days, until the turning toward me is what your interior does automatically in the presence of pain, rather than turning away. Bring the unexplained hurt, right now, in whatever form it is available to you. I am here. I have always been here. I have been waiting for this bringing, and I will meet it with everything I am. I want to pray over you now. I want to speak a declaration over you that covers everything we have addressed together in this time. A prayer that reaches into each area of the hurt and speaks something living into it. Receive this not as words being spoken about you from a distance, but as words being spoken directly into you by the one who made you and who knows you completely and who is entirely committed to your wholeness. Let each sentence land. Let what needs to be felt be felt. Let what needs to be released be released. This prayer is for you specifically, in this moment, in the exact condition you are currently in. I speak to the hurt that has no name, and I call it seen. I call it witnessed. I declare that it is not invisible, not invalid, not beyond the reach of healing. I speak directly into the wordless place where this pain lives, and I say, you are known here. The one who made this interior knows every chamber of it and is present in this chamber right now with full awareness and full compassion and full intention toward restoration. I speak to the years of carrying this alone, and I call them honored. Every day of functioning while internally navigating this weight, every morning of getting up and engaging with life while something unaddressed was moving through you, every act of reaching toward connection and meaning despite the exhaustion of the carrying, I honor it. I see it. I declare that the endurance represented by those years is not nothing. It is the evidence of a strength that was given to you by me, and that has served you faithfully, and that I am now adding my strength too, so that what you carry going forward is not carried by your strength alone. I speak to the shame, and I command it to release its grip. I declare that shame's primary claim over this person, the claim that complete knowing produces rejection, is a lie that I am actively disproving by my complete knowing and my complete staying. Shame, you have no authority here that is not given to you by belief, and I am replacing the belief that sustains you with the truth that dismantles you. This person is fully known and fully loved simultaneously, and your insistence that those two things are incompatible is broken by the reality of my presence right now. I speak to the false messages that were received early, before there was capacity to evaluate or resist them, and I declare them null. I declare that what was spoken over this person by limited and wounded human voices is not the final word on who they are. The final word belongs to me, the one who formed them, and my word is this: beloved, intentional, designed with purpose, made with care, worth the full work of restoration, never a mistake, never too much, never fundamentally deficient. I replace every false word with my true word, and I ask that my true word go deep, deeper than the false word went, all the way down to the root where the false belief was installed, and displace it completely. I speak to the grief, the named grief, and the unnamed grief, the acknowledged losses and the unacknowledged ones. I declare that every loss is seen by me, that none of the things that were taken or that never came are invisible to my awareness, that the grief which has had no witness now has one, that the mourning which was never given permission is given permission now in this moment, in my presence, which is the safest context in which grief has ever been felt. I grieve with you. I do not stand above the grief with detachment. I enter it with you, and I declare that grief wept in my presence is grief that is moving, that is processing, that is doing what it was designed to do, and that on the other side of it is not emptiness, but room. Room for what I intend to fill with something true and lasting. I speak to the body that has been carrying what the words could not contain. I speak to the tightness in the shoulders, the heaviness in the chest, the fatigue that sleep has not cured, the symptoms that medicine has not fully explained. I declare that the body is not separate from this healing. I made the body, and I am reaching into it as well as the mind and the spirit. I speak release to what has been held in the physical form of this person. I speak rest to the nervous system that has been on alert for too long. I speak ease to the places of chronic tension. I declare the body a participant in this healing, not merely a container that will benefit eventually from what happens in the interior, but a place I am actively touching and restoring right now. I speak to the relational world of this person, and I declare that the patterns formed by the wound are not permanent. I declare that the capacity for genuine intimacy, for being known and staying present, for giving and receiving love without the full weight of the defensive structure between them and connection, is being restored. I declare that the relationships in this person's life that are meant to go deeper will go deeper as the healing creates the conditions for it. I declare that new relationships are possible, relationships in which the healed version of this person can be more fully present than the defended version was able to be, relationships that carry a quality of mutuality and genuine knowing that has not been fully available before now. I speak to the faith that has been worn and thinned and complicated by the unexplained hurt, and I declare that it is not finished. I declare that the doubt that lives alongside the belief is not a disqualification, but an invitation to a more honest and more resilient faith than the one that existed before the difficulty came. I declare the static thinning. I declare the frequency clearing. I declare the voice that has been muffled becoming distinct, the presence that has felt absent returning to felt awareness, the spiritual life that has been going through motions beginning to find genuine movement again beneath the motions and then through them. I speak to the future of this person, the specific future I have designed and maintained and have not abandoned, regardless of how long the healing has taken, and I declare it intact. I declare that nothing that has happened has disqualified this person from the life I intended for them. I declare the wound becoming wisdom, the pain becoming depth, the years of navigating the unexplained hurt becoming a qualification for a specific ministry of presence to others who are carrying what this person has carried and who need someone who knows the territory from the inside. I declare the story redeemable. Every chapter of it, not in the sense that the hard things were good, but in the sense that I am good and I waste nothing. And what has been hard is being woven into something that serves a purpose larger than the pain itself. And over all of this, over the whole of this person, in this moment and in every moment that follows this one, I declare my love. Not as a concept, but as a reality. Not as a statement to be believed, but as a presence to be inhabited. I declare that this person is loved with a love that does not waver according to their performance or their progress or the state of their healing on any given day. Loved in the hard days and the clear days, and the days of regression and the days of breakthrough alike. Loved in the complexity and the confusion and the continuing. Loved now, loved completely. Loved by me, the one who made them and who understands them completely and who has been present in every moment of everything and who is not going anywhere and who calls them right now in this moment by name. Support this ministry through the link given below. Every person who is reached by these words is someone sitting in the same silence, carrying the same unexplained weight, waiting for the same recognition that you have found here. Your support sends these words to them. We have come a long way together in this time, you and I want to close, not with a summary of what has been said, but with a sending forward, a final word that you carry out of this encounter and into the rest of your day and your week and your life, because this is not the end of something. It is the beginning of something, or the continuation of something that has been waiting to properly begin, and I want to send you into that beginning with everything you need to carry it well. You came to these words carrying something you could not explain. And I want you to notice, as you prepare to leave them, whether something has shifted, not necessarily resolved, not necessarily healed in the complete sense, but shifted, whether the hurt feels slightly less alone than it did when you began, whether something in the interior has been acknowledged that had not been acknowledged before. Whether the quality of the silence inside you is fractionally different, carrying slightly less of the static and slightly more of the sense that something is present with you in it. If you notice any of that, however small, that is real. That is not imagination. That is the beginning of what I am doing in you, responding to the conditions of openness that you created by being here, by letting these words in, by choosing to receive rather than dismiss what was being offered. Honor that beginning. Do not minimize it because it is small. Small beginnings that are tended become significant things. I want to say something about what comes after this moment, about the days and weeks ahead, because I know that the experience of being met in a message like this one can fade quickly when you return to the ordinary texture of life, when the demands of the day reassert themselves and the emotional resonance of this encounter begins to thin, and the question arises of whether what felt so real here was actually as real as it felt. I want to address that question now, before you encounter it, so that you have an answer ready when it comes. What was real here is still real when the feeling of it fades. My understanding of your unexplained hurt is not dependent on your awareness of it. My presence with you in the interior is not contingent on your ability to feel it in any given moment. The declarations spoken over you are not less true on the days when they feel distant than they are on the days when they feel close and certain. Truth does not fluctuate according to feeling. I do not fluctuate according to your circumstances. What was real in this moment is real always, and you're returning to it. You're choosing to call it to mind on the days when it feels distant. Your decision to speak it back to yourself when the old voices get loud again. That is not wishful thinking. That is the anchoring of your interior to something that does not move. I want to give you something specific to return to when the days are hard. When the unexplained hurt rises, and the familiar weight settles back in, and the old story about your deficiency starts speaking again, come back to this. He understands it completely, not approximately, not in part, completely. Those three words carry everything. They carry the end of the aloneness. They carry the refutation of the shame. They carry the answer to the question of whether you are known and whether the knowing produces love or judgment. He understands it completely. Write it somewhere, you will see it. Say it to yourself in the moments when the static gets loud. Let it be the thing you return to when you cannot access anything more complex or more articulate, because it is enough. It contains everything. He understands it completely, and he is still here, and he is still working, and he is still for you. And the work is not finished, and you are not alone in it. I also want to speak to what you do with this in relation to other people. As the healing progresses, you will find yourself in the presence of others who are carrying what you have been carrying. You will recognize it in them because you know the texture of it from the inside, the specific quality of someone who is hurting in ways they cannot explain, who has learned to manage and present and function while something unaddressed is moving through them. And your presence with them, your willingness to stay rather than give advice, to witness rather than fix, to reflect back the same recognition that you needed and are now receiving, will be one of the most significant gifts you can offer. Not because you have arrived at complete healing before you can be useful to anyone, but because even in the middle of your own healing, you carry something true that they need. You carry the knowledge that the unexplained hurt is real, and that it is not permanent, and that there is one who understands it completely, and who does not withdraw from it, but moves toward it. That knowledge, shared from the inside of the experience rather than from a position of having moved past it, has a particular authority and a particular tenderness that reaches people who could not be reached any other way. Your wound, even in process, is already a gift to the world around you. Go forward from here knowing that you are not the same as you were when you began. Something has been spoken into the interior that will continue to work even after the reading of it ends. Something has been seen that cannot be unseen. Something has been named between you and me that changes the quality of what exists between us, that opens a door that I am asking you to keep open, to keep coming back through, to make the crossing and recrossing of it the primary pattern of your interior life. Come to me with the unexplained hurt. Come to me with the unnamed weight. Come to me with the wordless thing that rises in the night, and the wordless thing that settles in the morning, and the wordless thing that moves through you in the middle of perfectly ordinary days without announcing itself or explaining its presence. Come with all of it. I will always be here. I will always understand. I will always receive it without judgment and without impatience and without the sense that you have exceeded a limit or worn out a welcome. You have not worn out a welcome that has no limit. You cannot. It is not possible. You are my child. The hurt you cannot explain. I already understand completely, and I am not finished with you. I am not finished healing you. I am not finished restoring what was taken and building what was never given and speaking truth into the places where lies have lived. I am actively, persistently, lovingly at work in you right now, in this moment, in the hidden interior, in the places you have not yet been able to access yourself, in the depths that even you have not fully visited. I am there. I have always been there. And I am working with a patience and a precision and a love so complete that if you could see it fully, it would undo you in the best possible way, in the way that things come undone when they have been held too tightly for too long and are finally, gratefully, safely released. Be released. Even now, even here, even in the imperfect and uncertain and still in process place you are in, let something in you release, however slightly, however tentatively, into the hands that have been holding you all along without your knowing it. You are held. You are known. You are loved. You are mine. And that is enough for today, and it will be enough for tomorrow, and it will be enough for every day that follows, until you stand before me and understand everything completely, and the hurt that could not be explained is finally, fully, perfectly seen for what it was, the road that brought you all the way home. Support this ministry through the link given below. You have been reached by these words today. There are thousands more waiting to be reached. Your support carries this message to them.